Cali Biaggi, and I really appreciate the opportunity to discuss the threats to American democracy and possible solutions from the perspective of a faculty librarian. So the two major threats that I will discuss today are one, the prevalence of information disorder, and two, threats to intellectual freedom in the form of book bans and censorship. So let's start with information disorder. Excuse me. What is it? The term information disorder was introduced by Dr. Claire Wardle in 2017. It is meant to describe the spread of false, misleading, manipulative, and deceptive information in our media environments. Why use information disorder and not fake news? As Wardle explains, the term fake news has become overly politicized and used as a way to simply dismiss information that goes against one's beliefs. It also doesn't capture the complexity of the disordered information environment. This prevalent spread of misinformation is causing what has been called a crisis of information cynicism. In other words, individuals are so overwhelmed by trying to decipher what is and isn't true or real that they don't trust any information they encounter. A 2016 study led by Dr. Allison Head for Project Information Literacy found that college students are highly distrustful and overwhelmed by, quote, an increasing avalanche of news and information that appeals to emotions rather than conveying credible facts, end quote. People are also just generally not very good at evaluating the information they find, which is understandable because bad actors are getting better and better at faking information, and it's getting harder and harder to tell what's real and what isn't. I totally get it. Even I can be fooled. The problem happens when people spread and share harmful information, intentionally or not. The authors of a study entitled Evaluating Information, the Cornerstone of Civic Online Reasoning, wrote in their executive summary, quote, at present, we worry that democracy is threatened by the ease at which disinformation about civic issues is allowed to spread and flourish, end quote. And I couldn't agree more with that statement. If I felt otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting up here today. So the solution I have to offer for the threat of information disorder is to practice what Mike Caulfield calls information hygiene. That is, evaluating information to make sure it's accurate or clean before spreading it. I think a lot of people are taught to evaluate a source by closely analyzing the source itself, but that isn't always the best strategy. A biased source isn't going to announce that it is biased. A better strategy is to move away from that source and look at what other sources say about the claim or information being shared. I'm not saying that this is always going to be a simple solution. It could require a few layers of verification to get to the truth. But it's vitally important to start building those critical thinking skills. As you go through this process, I ask you to remember that there are objective standards for what constitutes a credible source of news or information. To call back to Monday's conversation, you want to look for sources that prioritize accuracy of facts over loyalty to ideology. I also urge you to be skeptical instead of cynical when encountering potentially false information. Try to get to the truth. Don't just shrug and move on, or worse, share something without a second thought. Democracy and critical thinking skills are also under threat due to the rash of book bans and censorship happening across the country. A key value of librarianship is intellectual freedom, which the American Library Association defines as, quote, the right of every individual to both seek and receive information from all points of view without restriction. The ALA Office of Intellectual Freedom further states, quote, intellectual freedom is the basis for our democratic system. We expect our people to be self-governors. But to do so responsibly, our citizenry must be well informed. Libraries provide the ideas and information in a variety of formats to allow people to inform themselves. End quote. The ALA defines censorship as the suppression of ideas and information that certain persons, individuals, groups, government officials find objectionable or dangerous. Censorship is a threat to intellectual freedom. Book bans are an example of censorship, and they're becoming increasingly prevalent, especially in public schools and public libraries. Library staff in every state are facing an unprecedented number of attempts to ban books. In 2021, the ALA's Office for Intellectual Freedom tracked over 1,500 individual book challenges or removals in public school and academic libraries. Most of the books challenged or removed were by or about Black or LGBTQ plus people, and they were mainly books for children. And the censorship is happening in Nebraska. A book was surreptitiously removed from the 2021 Golden Sower nominees list because it portrayed a character with gay parents. For those not from Nebraska, the Golden Sower is an annual award for children's literature. Nebraska children read the nominated books and vote for their favorites. The nominations list is compiled by a committee of adult volunteers with specific criteria, including that, quote, nominated titles should reflect an equitable consideration for a culturally diverse society. In the case that happened last year, the book had made it onto the final nomination list that was about to be distributed to readers. But at the last moment, and without consulting the rest of the committee, the chair removed the book and replaced it with a different book because they felt the LGBTQ plus representation in the original selection would be, quote, something that our parochial schools could not support, end quote. The book was eventually added back onto the list, but the fallout from this incident was prolonged and ugly. I won't get into the details, but this example illustrates that attempted censorship is prevalent everywhere. So my solution for the threat posed by book bans and censorship is twofold. One, people must remember that it is not a librarian's responsibility to decide whether a particular book is right for an individual of any age. That said, most challenge books are children's books. If a parent has an objection to a book for their own child, that is the parent's right. However, that doesn't mean the book should be removed from the library or school. It is no one person's right to restrict access to books or information for anyone else simply because they don't agree with it. Two, if you are so inclined, speak up. Public libraries have boards. Public schools have boards. I myself am a member of the Nebraska Library Commission, State Advisory Council for Libraries. All of these groups should hold meetings with time for public comments. So I invite you to seek out these meetings and share your support for intellectual freedom. Or if you don't want to speak, write a letter. The book challenges we are seeing are coming from a very vocal minority of people. It is crucial to show individuals in decision-making positions that the folks who support intellectual freedom outnumber those who would censor information they personally don't agree with. To conclude with another callback to Monday's presentations, if censorship is allowed to prevail, we can't have the well-informed citizenry, which Thomas Jefferson called the best defense against tyranny. Thank you.